think we can go on, and I'm really excited for the next talk. Hans Christian will talk about being friends with design style guides, and we are really glad to have him here today. So please help me all and put your hands together and welcome Hans Christian.
Guys, and hello. So the microphone is working. You had a great night yesterday, some partying? No? Okay. We had a great dinner and was pretty good food, and we had a couple of beers. It was a fun night. Just a few quick words before I start about me, who I am, and what I do. So my name is Hans Christian Reinl, and I'm a front-end freelance developer. I'm from Freiburg in Germany. You might have heard of that because of Smashing Mag. Don't know, is Vitaly in here? Nope. Okay, so Vitaly is from Smashing Magazine, and they are in Freiburg, and I know the guys from there, and they are really cool. So go talk to Vitaly, he's a nice person. On the internet, my handle is basically on Twitter and GitHub and everywhere else is Droplik. So check it out if you're interested. Write me an email if you have any questions. Or don't. I don't know. There are a couple of projects I work on in my free time, mostly in open source. The most well-known thing is HTML5 boilerplate, I guess, where I'm on the team. One of the team developers. I also have a German web podcast weekly where we talk about the latest stuff in web technology and stuff like that in German. Awesome, right? It's called Working Draft. It's pretty cool. Check it out if you don't know it and speak German. I'm a co-host there, and I have a blog with a colleague of mine, which is called The Nitty Gritty. And we do basically the same as we do in the podcast, but online as blog posts and links and stuff like that. So if you want to stay on the latest development stuff, go check it out, thenittigritty.co. You can follow the slides, actually. They are on GitHub, droplik.github.io/FEC style guides. If you're interested and don't want to look over here, but want to work, I don't know, whatever. You can listen to what I say. So basically the topic for today for my presentation is be friends with your designers and style guides. Actually, I gave this talk a couple of times, 2 times. What I changed this time is the font face. I used Helvetica because we're in Switzerland, right? Awesome, awesome. Love it. So the plan for today is I want to talk about basically three topics. First of all, friendship. Be friends with your designer. What does friendship even mean for us as developers or designers? Then I want to look a little bit about at the history of style guides and what style guides really are, how they came into existence, in order to understand the topic better, what a style guide is. Then we want to look at some examples how we can utilize this and how we as developers and designers can connect throughout with style guides and how we can utilize them. So let's start. Friendship. Who of you works in a team? Just show me some hands. Okay, basically that's nearly everybody, right? Everybody works in a team at some point. Maybe it's just a designer that you're working with, maybe it's just a back-end developer or something like that. By the way, I'm speaking in the perspective of a developer. I'm a front-end developer, as I said, so I'm mostly saying we're working with designers, but I also mean we're working with developers, so it's both ways. And when you work in a team of developers, I think it's important that you focus on this team and that you can become friends with your teammates, because your teammates are the people you are most connected with throughout the project. What I think is important when you want to stick to or when you want to build a great team is that you build friendship throughout the team. Because as I will show you in a second, friendship builds great teams. For example, these guys. Who of you knows Pokemon, right? There is Team Rocket in Pokemon. They are like a team that is already implied by the name. And they have this mission to obtain rare Pokemon and to take over the world at some point, whatever. And they are friends because they have the same mission. And on the other hand, we have Ash and his friends, Rocco and Missy, that are friends and become a team because they fight against Team Rocket, and they fight against, or they collect Pokemon, and that is what makes them a team, and it makes them a good team because they are friends. They have the same mission. And then there are these guys, right? The A-Team. They are banned from or they ran away from the army, but they have to fulfill certain missions or have certain situations where they are dependent on each other, and this is what forms them as a team. They become friends because they have these situations where they need each other, and this is basically the same for us as developers or as front-end designers, front-end developers, whatever. But we have this situation where it gets hard in our job, where we fight about a certain thing, a certain topic. How does something look? Is the UX really nice? Does it work the way you expect it? And your developer has another opinion than you have. And I mean, who of you isn't used to sentences like, are you even listening, dude? Or, you never admit you're wrong when it comes to design, right? And I think there are certain helpers and certain tools that we can utilize to prevent this fighting or the struggling about a certain topic. So what I would advise you to do is, in order to not fight too much in your team, but to maintain the friendship, use helpers as, for example, star guides. And star guides are one thing I want to talk to you about today, that help you in your team to maintain this friendship I talked about earlier. In order to understand star guides, I think it's important to understand a little bit about the history of star guides and how they came into existence. So let's do a little bit of history lessons. When you look at star guides, you basically have to look at a little bit more abstract thing than just a star guide as we are used to it, maybe as a designer. And one thing in this, or more abstract thing, is corporate identity. Basically, corporate identity is around for a very, very long time, and there are a couple of designers in here that may know the story better than I do, but that is my 2 cents to it. For example, if you look at religions as Christianity, they have this corporate identity or this brand sign, that the cross, right? When you see the cross, you totally connect it, or most of the time you connect it to Christianity. And also other religions, as for example Judaism, they have the Judaic or the Star of David that is connected to their religion. And if you see this sign, you identify it as a Judaic symbol, right? And this is something where the early stage of branding or corporate identity was formed back 2,000 or even more years ago. And then throughout the medieval times, there were kings and nobles that had like the same armor for their weaponry, and that had the same flags. The flags looked all the same, so they could identify themselves in war or wherever. They also had the same tableware that looked everywhere the same, and they didn't have really a mixture, and that was something you could identify this king or noble with. And throughout this time, it became more and more relevant for certain professions to identify themselves. For example, this caduceus, it's called, was a sign and still is a sign for physicians, where they identify themselves with. It's a sign that's basically in every good font face. It's a Unicode sign that you can use just in your web page, and I think that's interesting. And this is something that sticks around with us for a couple of hundred years. As I said, it became more and more important for certain professions to put a certain brand with themselves, but it became also important for businesses, especially throughout the Industrial Revolution, where companies and small manufacturers developed their own symbols and their own logos that identified themselves. And if something gets important, there is always politics that get involved with it, right? So throughout this time, politicians thought, hey, it would be nice if we could do something like an office where you can register what you define yourself, what your brand looks like. So there were these trademark offices in a very, very early stage where you could register your trademark, and that is still around today. Even today you can see, like on Coca-Cola, they have this symbol right above their name because it's a registered trademark, and this all is something that comes from a medieval time. And I think that's really important to know when you look at maybe style guides, because what evolved from there are certain style guides, to say it again, for publishers. For example, when you wanted to do a publication in, I don't know, 18th, 19th century, there were certain printers and certain publishers that said, hey, when you want to publish something with us, publish it with the font face X and Y. And you have to set italics in this and that matter. And you have to do quotations in this and that particular way. And this was something to maintain consistency throughout the publications this publisher did. The same happened at schools or university as this one. Scholars were asked to stick to a certain style guide and to publish their stuff under a style guide that identified the university better, so the people could really easily dig where this publication came from. And in 1950s, 1960, this whole thing of style guides took another level. There were big brands, big companies that wanted to identify themselves in public better, and that wanted to do real marketing, and that wanted to have a really consistent way of how they look with their identity to the public. And one example I want to show you is Lufthansa. Lufthansa had a study in 1962, 1963, where they really looked into what they do at the moment for branding and for styling, and how they design themselves and their brand. And what came out of the study was that they are pretty inconsistent. That everybody does something else. Every branch has their own little style guide, and the logo doesn't appear in the same way all time. And this was the time when they formed their first style guide, when they decided that their logo looks just like this with these colors. The interesting thing is they switched it a little bit to a more digital style guide these days, because we have the internet and the web, and I want to come back a little bit to what this means for us. And this is exactly what Lufthansa did. They published their style guide online. And I want to show you just a quick example of the web page, how this looks. For example, here you can see the logo and how you would style a logo if you're a designer for Lufthansa. Here are the margins and the paddings and stuff like that. I'm not too familiar, I'm not a designer, as I said, but they really show you how you would use their brand and their brand name connected with each other. The interesting thing is, nowadays they have the same thing for online presentations or for their websites. they have a style guide on how you would design a web page for them. For example, they show you how to use the logo again, how you would position it, what the margins are, the paddings are, then again what the header looks like on a web page, right? So this is pretty much a style guide that you would, no connection, sad, that you could use within your team, right? That looks exactly like this, and you go to this page and just take the things you need and design directly from there. And this, as it says in the sentence, it creates a consistency throughout your looks and throughout what you do for your web projects, and especially Lufthansa had a feeling that this helps them with their presentation online. So let's go back to the presentation. The question is, why would we as designers and developers in our teams use style guides, right? I said it a little bit for Lufthansa. The problem they had was they had a lot of freelancers, and there were people coming to their teams and joining and leaving and stuff like that. And everybody had an opinion. A good one, maybe a bad one, but it had to be discussed. And this takes time. Discussions take time. And maybe they end in a fight. Maybe they end in a struggle, and you're not the same when you go out of a meeting and someone said, "Oh no, your idea is shit." And that's why they decided to really focus on what they want to do and to create a certain consistency throughout their projects, and to maintain the friendship within the team, right? To save time, to work faster. And this is the same for us. When we utilize style guides for our daily work, it can help us to work faster and to maintain a certain friendship within our team. Because we can always say, hey, look, there's the style guide. Let's see how the style guide does it, and let's decide on what we want to do now based on the style guide, based on a certain rule set we can use. I want to show you another example. A style guide that I did with a company I worked for a couple of months ago. This is a style guide for a big company in Germany, but I renamed it to a style guide because I don't know if you're really interested in the company's name. And I want to show you the style guide that I, as a front-end developer without a lot of design knowledge, did this. Basically, what we have here is just a quick introduction. Oh, yeah, you can read the name. I can skip it. And then we have a color palette. Okay, this is far too much colors, blah, 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 whatever. But then we have a definition of how the header and the footer look, for example, with font faces, the font faces we use, the colors we use, how the logo has a certain margin and stuff like that, the typography with an example. I think Stephen Hague outlined this at Smashing Conference. There are certain tools to create screenshots from your actual web project that you can put in your style guide automatically and publish your information next to it. I think Dexy is one of them, right? So this is pretty interesting, and we didn't do it that way, but we always had an example, so people that were in a certain situation, conflicting situation, where they didn't know how to do a certain thing, could look at the style guide and say, hey, our H1 always looks this way. If it's a good decision or not, that's up to the designers, I guess. Then there are paragraphs or quotations, how they look. And if we go into a little bit more elementary thing in HTML, if we translate this a little bit, we can see, for example, how links look, how certain variants of links look, how lists look, right? How forms look, how I don't know, input fields look, drop downs and stuff like that, and we defined it, and you can just scroll through the page and find what you need when you basically want to do another page for this exact layout. And even if you have a fight with your developer or you're discussing certain things, you can always go there, put another example in there that defines your certain use case that you need. And I think this is something that helps a lot when you're working on a team, because you always have some basis that you can refer to, as I said earlier. So, I talked a little bit about how style guides work and how you can utilize them, but I'm a developer. Maybe there are some developers in the room, and I really want to focus on another point, which is a style guide for your code, or code conventions. Code conventions are here to help you, to guide you through through making your code. But the question is, why do we need this? Why do we need a style guide for our code, right? Well, basically, there were a couple of studies that, and one particular from a Lisp book from the 80s, that said you put more than 60% of the time that you develop on your product into maintenance. Most projects aren't throwaway projects. Mostly you stick to the project for a couple of months or even years. If you build a bigger project, you work on the same project over and over again. And when you have a certain consistency throughout your code and the style of code you write, it helps you to improve readability and understanding throughout your team. For example, think of coworkers that need to read your code, or new people that come to a project that never seen any line of code before. And if you don't have a certain consistency throughout your coding style, they don't dig what you said in the code, right? Because it's hard to understand someone else's code. There is enough functionality in code that you need to understand in order to get it, but if the code style is easy to read, it's easier for you to dig what was said there. When we talk about that, the question is always, how would you do that? What I would advise you is basically that you use best practices, stuff that is already out there. Look what have others done, what is a proven thing. Use resources. For example, there is this style guide by GitHub. GitHub has a style guide on how they write markup or how they write CSS. And even how they write Ruby or JavaScript, if you're interested in that. You can just go to the page, look what's on there, and take the parts that you need for your team and that apply best to us, to your team. For example, the markup style guide. It's not that much in here, but it says use paragraphs when you want to display text, use lists where lists are appropriate, and stuff like that. It's pretty straightforward. Everything that you might know when you write your code, but maybe your coworker doesn't know. Maybe it's clear to you, but not to someone else, so write it down. It's not that hard for markup, but when it comes, for example, to CSS, a lot of people have different rules for how they write their CSS code or their less code or Sass, I don't know. For example, this style guide says, use soft tabs with 2 spaces indent. Put space after a colon. Put a space before a curly bracket. These are all rules I would personally say, awesome, right? But when you talk to a Harry Roberts, for example, he would say, well, we don't need the colon, the space. Why should we do that? He is right. I'm right. So there is no real wrong, but we have to find a consistent way to do it, so our project gets easier to dig, and the code we are using is more on the same level and more on the same basis. There are also other tools, as for example, idiomatic CSS by Nicholas Gallagher, or for JavaScript there is idiomatic JS that you can look at, or the jQuery style guide is a pretty great resource. Just take the bits and pieces you need, write them down for your team, and decide what is best for you, and stripe out the rest. Ooh. So, a thing I talked about earlier when it came to style guides was the concept of components. Components basically are a little bit of the code that is behind the things you see on a web page. Components can help you in a certain way with your web project, but let me explain it a little more clear with this quote from Wikipedia that gives a really good overview of what components in software development or front-end development really are. It says, component-based software engineering is a branch of software engineering that emphasizes the separation of concerns in respect of the wide-ranging functionality available throughout a given software system. And it continues, it is a reuse-based approach to defining, implementing, and composing loosely coupled implemented components into systems. So basically this quote says all about the averages of components and component-based web development. First of all, the separation of concerns. In your code, you don't want to have CSS in markup. You don't want to have CSS in JavaScript. You don't want to have JavaScript in your HTML, right? So the separation of concerns is one of the main advantages that you have when you build components throughout your web project. The reuse and the sharing of certain components or modules or widgets or whatever you would like to call them is another advantage, because mostly when you develop a component, and we will look at this in a couple of seconds, is that you look at it without the context it appears in. You don't focus on where on a page does my teaser appear, but you try to say, oh, we need a teaser. I don't know what it might look like, something like this. And with this, you get a better separation within your team. One guy can style, for example, or can produce a slider. The other one does the teaser section. And the third guy does the navigation or something like that. And this enables you for faster development because you're not dependent on other people, mostly. Something that is also an advantage, and it is also faster development, is when you have built components that you can reuse and so on and so forth, is that you can reuse them on other web pages to do exactly the same thing that looks maybe nearly the same in another way, but has the same functionality, and this enables you for faster development, right? Question always is, how does this apply to the front end, this software engineering, component-based designing, blah, blah, blah? Well, actually, all your different page parts, all your teasers, all your elements that you have on a page are basically components, and you can use them as components. Your designers can look at them and say, oh, this is a component, I just designed this little piece of the web page. Basically, when it comes to development, it's the same. You look at them without any context, and they're a little bit like jQuery plugins. For example, when you take a jQuery plugin, drop it in your page, it basically works without you doing a ton of things. It looks okay, it has the functionality, but I would advise you not to use too many jQuery plugins for anything. The question always is, when would you use this approach of building a lot of components for your website and to build them and reuse them? Well, the most use cases are basically larger websites, as the quotation said, wide-ranging functionality. So if you have a lot of modules and a lot of functionality, you can use components. Web application, you want to reuse certain things. And also style guides, as I said before. You can use a component on your web page. You can use it in your style guide. And then I thought about smaller web projects and how components help you in smaller web projects, and I thought to myself, there is no reuse that you have in smaller web projects most of the time. But maybe someone else goes to the project and has to do a couple of rearrangements and stuff like that, maintenance again. And then it is helpful to have a separation of your components that you do that you have in your project, and that's why I would say use the component-based design approach in smaller web projects too. So I've talked a little bit too much maybe about the theory. But what does it actually look like when you have a component-based development workflow? And this is basically the structure of a component. You have markup, you have style, and you have functionality. And these 3 points directly translate to HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in any given way. Maybe it's CoffeeScript, maybe you use Less or whatever. But basically a component builds up these 3 main components or main aspects. And I want to show you a quick example of a component that I did that is somehow looks like a jQuery plugin but isn't. Anyway, it's a CSS modal. It's a modal, you know this from, let me close, oh no, that was bad. Oh, awesome. You know this from maybe Bootstrap. Bootstrap has these modals, and when you click on a link, it opens something like this. Basically, I built the same thing again because no one else did it, right? But I built it with CSS only. This works. This showing the modal works with no JavaScript at all, basically. I'll show you in a second. The cool thing is, this is the repository on GitHub, so check it out if you're interested. The cool thing is, we have basically the 3 parts, markup, styling, and functionality in our project, in our component. For example, we have the index.html, where you can find a couple of examples of how the markup maybe looks like. This is something like this. Here is the modal. Basically, you have a wrapper. This is the section thing. You have a header and a content area and a footer, and that's it. Pretty straightforward, right? But then if we go backward, we can see this SCSS file. So I wrote this in SCSS. It's the styling aspect of this component. If you look at this, it's basically just a couple of variables for your configuration that you would need, and you can do this in your web project the same way. You can put colors in there. For example, your designer says, oh, this green needs to be changed a little bit, just a little bit. Okay, go there and change the variable. It's easy. Every designer can do that, right? So, and then you have the styling. Maybe some basis is applied there. Maybe you build upon normalized CSS, and you have some certain dependencies that you build upon. Maybe this is nonsense. I don't know. It's not the perfect thing that I built in this case. And then you have the modal with all its styles that go in there, that utilize the configuration variables that you had earlier, and basically everything that goes within the modal. In this case, I use placeholders in CSS, if you're familiar with these. The cool thing is you can easily reuse the code that you built for one particular thing on another particular thing. But if you're more interested in that, come to me later and I'll explain this approach to you. So basically here are the styles. It's a lot of code, maybe too much at the moment, I don't know. And the last part is the functionality. And functionality comes with JavaScript in most cases. In this case, the model works without JavaScript. Do you believe me or not? Who believes me? And the others are not, are a lot of people. But I can show you that it works by turning off JavaScript in this awesome browser. Oops, no, this way. Oh no, I can't because, oh yeah, JavaScript is now turned off. You have to believe me, I'm sorry, because I can't reload because I'm not on a net. Oh, I am on a network. Oh yeah, oh, awesome. Okay, that was bad. So it doesn't work. I can show you locally. Is anyone interested, by the way? Okay, this isn't the latest version on my local machine. I turn off JavaScript, reload the page, click on this, and the model still appears. Awesome, right? Cool thing is, I decided to add some functionality, for example, for accessibility reasons, focusing the model. A screen reader or a user with a screen reader doesn't want to stick in or stay in your page when you're opening a modal, but you want to go to the modal, and this is something I programmed in JavaScript. So there are a couple more options that you could use. You can also subscribe to events and stuff like that. So yeah, here's, for example, the set modal, the set focus function that puts the focus of the user into that modal and lets you circle through it. Awesome. Right, and basically these are the three ways. Sorry about that. 3 ways that I described earlier: markup, styles, functionality. And you can apply this basically to every component that you build throughout your web projects with your dependencies. What you can do when you have a larger project is you can build component libraries. Basically, they are user interface libraries. And one of the most famous, best-known user interface library is Bootstrap. Bootstrap has a lot of these components that are basically built exactly the same way as I described earlier. They have markup, they have the styles, and they have the functionality. For example, if you go in here and just scroll down to maybe some breadcrumbs. Or, yeah, let's say breadcrumbs. You have on the web page, you have this markup that you would use to generate the breadcrumbs. Then you have some styles that you just throw in your project, the file, the last file. And then there is a JavaScript file, maybe not for breadcrumbs, maybe this is a bad example, but maybe for pagination. That lets the pagination work exactly the way it should be, right? It should work. And basically, these are the three main parts that I said in this project. So if you have questions about this, how this works, or how you would do this best in your code and how code looks like, go to this project and check it out. It's awesome. Don't look at the JavaScript. Whatever. A thing that can help you with component-based web development is Bower. Bower is a tool developed by Twitter, which calls itself a package manager for the web. What this does is it helps you to request your components, the page parts that you want to use via your command line. You need to install it via npm if you're familiar with that, and then you can easily install projects, as for example the CSS model I just showed you, via the command line. I will show you this. If you're not afraid of the command line, bump up the font size a little bit. Can you see it? Yeah, this is I guess. So let's create another folder. Let's call this temp. Oh, I already got one. CD temp. And now I told you about Bower and that you need to install it. I've already installed it globally on my machine, so it should just work. The cool thing is now the folder is empty, as you can see, but I want to have this project, for example, CSS modal, within this folder. So I just say Bower install, this is a shortcut for install, CSS modal. And now magic happens. I doesn't work because I'm not on the latest version, I guess. Yeah, okay. That's bad. I'm sorry about that. Just a couple of seconds, npm minus install minus g. So while this is running, again, I hope this is working and not too much for the network. No, it's too much for the network. Okay, I can't show you this, but I can tell you it's a helpful tool because it enables you to develop faster and to just require your components with a command line, with the short command line code, and that's pretty easy, I think. Maybe not for the designers, but for the developers. If you think beyond that, you can use Bower, for example, for your own web projects and use your own Git repositories in order to require your components. There are also products as, for example, Component that does exactly the same, which is also a front-end package manager. Look at that if you're interested. And then there is Bower, which uses then there is Yeoman, which uses Bower basically to scaffold a little bit of your project, and it is even easier for you to create your projects on the fly. Short wrap up for what I said today. Basically, for your teams, I think it's important that you build friendships. That you like each other, because it's easier to decide on certain aspects of your development workflow. Use style guides to maintain this friendship throughout your team, because they help you, as I said before, which is great. And define style guides for your code, because these maintain the friendship throughout developers, and this is important, I think. If we apply all these, we can become a great team, right, as these guys. And I think this is really important. As I say, I gave this talk earlier this year, and there was a person who said this before my talk. Why is it still about the fight between designer and developer, or developer and developer, whatever? It's 2013. We all want the best result, right? And I think this really digs the topic pretty much. Don't fight about it. Just do the best you can. Thanks a bunch.
Thank you very much. So we have a little time for some questions. I'm not going to pass the mic, you're in the front, so I'm going to pass you the mic, but in the back you will have to speak very loud.
Yeah, I was wondering, you showed the style guide earlier that you did. Have you used any tool to generate that, or did you simply list the elements in the HTML file?
So if I've used any tools within my workflow when creating the style guide?
Generates the...
basically, I used Bootstrap to have a good starting point, because it looked okay at that time, and it was pretty, it wasn't that widely used yet. But actually, no, I did this by hand. I wrote some JavaScript. I wanted to experiment a little bit. Actually, I heard this talk of Stephen Hay a little bit later, but there are certain tools out there, as I named, for example, Dexy. Then you can use Casper.js if you're familiar with that. It's a little bit more into deep command line stuff and JavaScript. And then there is Roger, who has an awesome tool that he will present later today, which is called Frontify, right? Sorry about that. Check this out. I think it's a great tool that can help you build style guides and I have to check it out myself, so.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks. Yeah.
I have a question because you're also a developer. The one style guy from GitHub that was being where it says, okay, you have to use the space before the wall, space after, yada yada. Do we need that if you have auto formatted code? Like, why would you go through great lengths to write down that you want to use the space if your IDE doesn't work for you?
So the question is, do we really need to have this code conventions within our team when we have auto formatting tools that we can utilize as, for example, our IDE? Basically, our IDE, you can't really say, put a space right after the colon, for example, in CSS, or at least I don't do that. You have to configure a lot of things. And then there is the question, do you really want to configure that much? And then another question appears, that is, what do your teammates do? Do they really know exactly the same level as you do, and do they know how to configure their IDE correctly? I just worked on a team where a new person joined us, and he hadn't really have an IDE that he used, an editor that he used, and it became hard for him to, or it would have been hard for him to dig all these configurations. And this is why I'd say that you should use something like a minimal, maybe not a full-length style guide for your code, because it's always better to have a certain basis that you can refer to. Does this answer it? Cool. More questions?
I wonder if you can keep your friendship level when you use, or everybody uses style guide. Because there is always, I was working on a project, a big project, where there was an extensive style guide describing everything really well. Exactly like the one you described on the slides. But then there is always a part of the project when there are arguments. It's the style guide you can't do everything. So at the end, as it would be possible, there was an external resource who actually maintained the style guide. They were like the style defenders.
Okay.
Because I don't believe in this thing.
Yeah.
That it's all a democratic process.
Yeah.
To be nice together and then we solve it. Actually, you have to have someone that's like this. You have to have someone
That
says,
does it.
Look, when you do it that way, you have to follow.
Okay, so to repeat it for the live stream again, the question is, do style guides really solve every problem, and isn't there an argument at some point, and how do we solve this argument, basically? Or your thesis is that we need to have someone who is like the dictator of how you really do a certain thing. I believe that if you're in a great team, you can find decisions based on the user tests you did, or the design decisions that were made by the design people. I think it's hard if you say you have to do it this and that way. And style guides are not the key to everything, or to maintain the perfect friendship within your team. That is something that you can't say. Also, component-based web development does not help you in every situation. But there are certain times when a style guide helps you through this. If you're a designer, for example, you sit in your office, and every 3 minutes someone comes to you and says, how do I do this and that? You can just refer them to the style guide. Other people won't come after a certain time because they learned that they can look at the style guide before asking, and this saves time. And it's all about saving time and about working in a good way and working faster. For me, it's like disturbing when a couple of minutes ago I answered a question about how to do a certain design or how to do a certain aspect in your code. And if you have to answer this question 3 to 4 times a week, it's destroying for yourself, I think. And that's why I think it helps you in a certain way, but it's not the key to everything. Yeah.
Maybe what you're telling us is about consensus in the team. Because I work with a developer who seems, a PHP developer seems to have a different approach. He's more the software guy.
Yeah.
So can you do that in that setting? And what he does is something that's awkward to use.
Yeah.
But it works.
Yeah.
So I say, it's not good. Yeah, how many people are going to use it? One person.
Yeah.
I think it's bad for the person who's going to use it. We need to his
True.
project.
True.
So the style guide we will have to do will be like leveling our priorities. It's when we care about even one single user.
Yeah.
Do we or don't we? Or else if we don't do it both ways.
So yeah, this wasn't a question. This was more like we have to find a consensus within our team, and we can do this with style guides that help us to maintain this. Basically, that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, I'm trying to apply it because there's so many unsolvable things.
That's true.
You can't do a specification for everything. You can't tell a coder to do it the good way.
Yeah, as I said, it's not the key to everything, and to tell a coder how he should do anything isn't the right way to do it, but you can try to find a good solution together while saying, hey, we need a certain functionality for our component, and as a developer you have to be like, oh yeah, the designer knows what to do, and not you're the man who does everything right and stuff like that. It's a little bit to step down from your ego sometimes. And personally, I had this with designers who believe I know everything, but they don't. And it's so hard to get a good or to maintain this in a good in a good way in your team, and that's hard. But yeah.
Perhaps
I
you can-
think one more question.
One more question.
Yeah, okay.
Perhaps. I think
Sorry.
back.
Mm-hmm.
It's one responsibility, responsibility for you, but approximately how
That doesn't limit yourself. So the question, basically, don't you limit yourself or the designers that work on a certain project with the style guide? I think limiting at some point is good. I think you have to not limit the creativity. That would be something that I can't really talk about, but you really have to be aware that you speak with your designers while developing. Just a little bit background, sorry, on this style guide. We did this because we worked with another agency who did the design, basically. And we had a lot of things where we said, and maybe you saw it, where we said, oh, that's not good, right? And then we tried to change it a little bit, just so it fits better in the situation for us as a developer. And they came back, the agency came back and said, oh no, it's not going to work that way. Please stick to the PESD we gave you, right? And this is a hard way, and that's why we said basically, hey, let's do a style guide where we define what's good and what's not good, and where we should change stuff that should be changed for the web page. Yeah. Stephen Hayes said something yesterday in the train. It's more about development. Does it limit yourself if you know what you can do within the browser? Does this limit your creativity in a certain way? And he said, I think you said, it was like, it doesn't limit you. It helps you to know more about what you can do, really, than what you can think of when you just stick to Photoshop, because you know the real world. And maybe it helps you to evolve, to establish a better creativity for web development, because basically that's what we do. We do web development and not Photoshop development. Okay, I think that's
Thank-
it.
thank you
Thanks
very
so
much.
much